Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to calculate the Gaussian integral, but in the classical way, in the original way that Gauss intended it to be calculated, I guess. Or I think he performed the computation of the integral using this method first. So I call it uh, the classical way, or the polar coordinates way. So let's get to it. So our problem integral, let's call it I for now. I is nothing but integral from negative infinity to positive infinity of e raised to negative x squared dx. So I've decided to choose the complete negative infinity to positive infinity region, not just 0 to infinity. So this is the complete region of all real x values, and we are integrating this e raised to negative x squared function over. So now notice that since this is a definite integral, although it's improper, but it's still a definite integral, we can just change the variables, right? So instead of x we can have a y, provided everything else remains the same. So upper and lower bounds are the same, the integrand is the same, but instead of x we write y, say, and instead of dx we write dy. That is still going to equal our original Gaussian integral, because by the property of definite integrals, it doesn't matter what variable we have, although as long as the integrand structure does not change and upper and lower bounds do not change, then we can write the same integral using any variable. So now I would like to multiply both of them with each other. So we have I times I times I being equal to integral from negative infinity to positive infinity of e raised to negative x squared dx multiplied with integral from negative infinity to positive infinity of e raised to negative y squared dy. So we'll have I squared over here, and now because of uniform convergence we can just put the y inside the x or the x inside the y. So let's put the x inside the y. So we'll have integral from negative infinity to infinity of e raised to negative x squared times e raised to negative y squared, which is inside e raised to integral from negative infinity to positive infinity, and the dx dy over here. So all I did is I just placed this x integral inside along with this y integral, inside the y integral basically. So then I'm writing the integrands as it is. So now by the properties of exponents we can write this as integral from negative infinity to positive infinity of integral from negative infinity to infinity of e raised to, I can take the minus out common, x squared plus y squared dx dy, and this is nothing but I squared. Now what can we do from here? Well, as I said at the start of the video, this is the classical method, or the method that involves using polar coordinates. So we are going to transform our coordinates, using appropriate mathematical steps. So we're just going to transform from Cartesian coordinates which have x and y to polar coordinates which have r and theta. I'll explain more about this on the next page. See you there. So we have our Cartesian coordinate axes, which are roughly like this. So this is x and this is y. So any point on them can be represented, let's call this x1 and this y1. Any point can be represented as x1 comma y1, like a pair of some distance that you travel on the x-axis comma some distance that you travel on the y-axis. So any point is a combination of some x and some y. This is what you call Cartesian coordinates. Now polar coordinates on the other hand are way different. So now instead of representing any point as a combination of x and y, we can represent any point by a combination of r, or the distance it is away from the center. This is the center, r, and what angle it subtends with respect to this plane, or theta. So r comma theta. So r basically varies. This could be 1, this could be r2, this could be r equals 3. You can think of them as radii basically, because they are all these concentric circle, like one concentric circle is at a fixed distance from the origin 0. So r equals 3 is at a distance 3 from the origin. But you could be at a same distance from the origin, but you could subtend a different angle each time with respect to this plane. So say this, for this could be say theta 1, and when you're say traveling over here, you're over here, this thing could be this anti-clockwise angle could be theta 2. So every time any point can be represented as the radius or the distance that it is away from the center, comma the angle that it subtends with the horizontal plane. So that is how you describe a polar coordinates. But you may ask me, how do we change from one coordinate to another? Well, you can do that if you consider the following. If you draw say a circle here, so any point on this circle subtends a certain angle with the x-axis, so call that theta, and that same point is at a distance, a given distance from the origin. You can call that r, the distance, you can call it r. Now because this is a circle, so you can say that the particle is going in a circular path. Since it is a circle, the radius is fixed, but I mean, you could have complicated motion, right? You could have motion that is not perfectly circular but elliptical, for example, where r is varying too with respect to certain parameters. But in our case, now this point over here, you can write how many units it is away on the x-axis, how many x's does it have, by using trigonometry. So how many x's it has is basically this horizontal length. You can see that equals x, in that case equals r times cosine of theta, because this is r is the hypotenuse, so x is naturally r times cosine of theta, and this distance, the vertical distance that it is at, or basically how many y's does it have, or how many units is it placed on the y-axis, can be again represented by the sine. So y equals r times sine of theta, because again r is the hypotenuse and y is just r times hypotenuse times the sine of this angle theta. So this is how you convert from polar coordinate, Cartesian coordinates to polar coordinates, and vice versa. If, you could just invert both sides, and then you would have an expression for r and theta independently. So let's go ahead and convert our integral that we obtained into polar coordinates. So we had our integral I squared being equal to integral from negative infinity to infinity of e raised to negative x squared plus y squared and the dx dy term. So as I said, converting to polar coordinates, we have x equal r times cosine of theta, y equals r times sine of theta. So let's plug that in. We have integral now. We'll fix the upper and lower bounds later. So e raised to negative r squared times cosine squared theta plus r squared times sine squared theta, and we also have to fix a dx dy. So the issue is dx dy is equal to some factor times dr d theta, and we have to find this factor. So for now, let's just put a blank and a dr d theta. I'll explain more about this. So now upper and lower bounds. So well, the inside integral is with respect to r. So notice that we were covering the entire x-axis and entire y-axis with in negative infinity and positive infinity. So we basically need to cover the entire space, because it's an integral over all real numbers. So now when we decide to cover all the space, dr will have to go from 0 to infinity and d theta will have to go from 0 to pi. Now in case you are wondering why r did not go from negative infinity to positive infinity, it's because r, radius, or the distance from the center to a given point, is always positive, right? The distance is always positive. That's basic geometry for you guys. Distance always has to be positive. Or if you think about it one way, if you're concerned that, say, if I'm only covering points on like this part because r is positive here, so called, what about these points? Well, I have to remind you that we are rotating, or our d theta, our angle theta, is going from 0 to 2 pi. So it's basically circling back and coming back to this start point. So even though you may say that r is only in the positive region, r is only working in the positive region, but notice that theta is making that r rotate in a complete circle. So because of that we only suffice with 0 to infinity, because this other part, this negative infinity part, for say, is getting covered up eventually, because theta will be greater than pi, right? So on the interval that theta is greater than pi, this lower portion will also get covered. So we're basically covering all our space by 0 to infinity and 0 to 2 pi for dr and for r and theta respectively. So now we can simplify this. We have integral from 0 to 2 pi of integral from 0 to infinity of e raised to negative. Now r square cosine squared theta plus r square sine squared theta is nothing but r squared, right? Because cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta is 1. So if e raised to negative r squared times some factor and a dr d theta term, and we actually need to find what factor this is. So before discussing about that factor, I would like to say that we chose polar coordinates in the first place because notice that x squared and y squared were in some way satisfying the Pythagoras theorem. If x and y were, say, dimensions of a right angle triangle, then they were satisfying the Pythagoras theorem. And that's exactly what we did. We took x equals r times cosine theta, assuming that to be the horizontal component of this point, and that y to be the vertical component of this point. So we basically used that assumption, and because of that assumption we had to resort to using polar coordinates, and that's why we just reduced everything to e raised to negative r squared, because cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta, by satisfying the Pythagoras theorem, just became 1. So that's why polar coordinates was a really useful thing over here. Now one challenge is, when you're converting from, say, Cartesian to polar, dx dy is equal to some factor, some correction factor as you may say, times dr d theta. Because the thing is, if you are, say, converting from one coordinate system to another coordinate system, there is some scaling up and scaling down. So that's to say, so if this is the x-axis, dx is, say, in some infinitesimal part of this x-axis, let's call it dx. Now that, when we are using, say, polar coordinates, now that may not exactly equal your infinitesimal part of dr, right? So dx and dr are not necessarily same. So like, say, this small slice of x, what that we call dx, is probably some factor, some scaling factor, times this infinitesimal factor of r, which we call dr. So dx is some factor times dr, and then same thing with y, it's some other factor times d theta. That's why, drawing analogies like this directly won't help us to find this combined factor over here. So what do we do now? So now there is something interesting called the Jacobian matrix. So the Jacobian matrix is basically, since we want everything in terms of dr d theta, so the useful Jacobian matrix for us is going to be this. Our old coordinate system differentiated partially with respect to r first time, and then on the same row we have the same numerator and differentiate with respect to theta this time. And now the second variable y differentiated partially with respect to r, and then differentiated partially with respect to theta. So it's a matrix of partial derivatives, and in the same row we have the same variable of the old coordinate system. Our old coordinate system was x and y, and our new coordinate system is r and theta. That's why we always differentiate with respect to the new. So old with respect to the new, and in the same column the numerator has the same quantities, if you will. So the partial derivative is being applied to the same old variable, but the basis of differentiation is changing in that row. And when you go down the column and you look at the bottom row, you have y, and again in the first column differentiating with respect to r, and in the second column differentiating with respect to theta. So we know our values, right? X equals r times cosine theta, y equals r times sine theta. Let's find this Jacobian matrix. So differentiating x with respect to r is basically cosine theta becomes a constant, and the derivative of r with respect to r is just 1. So we just have a cosine theta here. differentiating with respect to theta, r gets treated as a constant. The derivative of cosine is negative sine, so negative r times sine theta. Differentiating with respect to y, sine theta is a constant now, so we just have sine theta, other term goes to 1, and over here we have r times derivative of sine, so cosine theta. And why is this Jacobian matrix useful? That's because this factor that we were looking for, is nothing but the determinant of the Jacobian matrix. So it's time to basically take the determinant of the Jacobian matrix. So the determinant of this cosine theta minus r sine theta and sine theta r cosine theta, we can just basically this term times this term, so r times cosine squared theta minus this term times this term, so negative r sine squared theta. Now on simplification we get r times cosine squared theta plus r times sine squared theta. You can take the r common, we get cosine squared theta plus sine squared theta. And notice the interesting fact that this goes to 1. So we just have r. So our missing factor that we needed here is just r. Use the determinant of the Jacobian matrix for calculating that. And this goes for the method of finding the factor by the Jacobian matrix, goes for any change of coordinates. Say if you wanted to convert from Cartesian to spherical, Cartesian to cylindrical, any change of coordinates, this method works. So now that we know our r, let's go ahead and plug that in here. So this is r dr d theta. Let's calculate this on a fresh page. Our integral I squared is now integral from 0 to 2 pi of integral from 0 to negative infinity of e raised to negative r squared, and then we found the factor by the Jacobian matrix r and a dr d theta. Now there is an integral with respect to r, so we can use u substitution here because the derivative of r square is 2r and we can multiply and divide by 2. So you can see the derivative present in the beside the integrand. So u equals r squared, for example, so du is 2r dr. You have that substitution. I squared equals integral from 0 to 2 pi, half is outside, it's a constant anyways, and notice that 0 and infinity, the upper and lower bounds remain the same. Sorry, this is positive infinity, and we have e raised to negative u times 2r dr is just du, right? So du d theta, and this can be integrated easily, the inside function. So half of integral from 0 to 2 pi of, we have e raised to negative u divided by the coefficient of u, which is negative 1, evaluated from infinity to 0, and d theta term. So we have half of integral from 0 to 2 pi of, now notice that at infinity, as u tends to infinity, this term decays to 0, and at 0 you have a 1, so negative evaluated at 0, so negative and this negative are going to cancel out eventually, and e raised to 0 is 1, so we have 1 times d theta, or just d theta. And integrating this is very easy. We just have to plug in values of 2 pi and 0 into r theta. So we have half of 2 pi minus 0. 2 pi minus 0 is just 2 pi, and we have a half here, and this is I squared, that's pi. So taking square root on both sides, I is nothing but square root of pi, which is approximately 1.707, and that's the classic way, or the polar coordinates way of calculating the Gaussian integral, because I is just integral from negative infinity to positive infinity of e raised to negative x squared dx. So that's the complete Gaussian integral, and value of which is square root of pi. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Please like, share and subscribe. Recommend me to your friends. I really need to grow. And you can even follow me on Instagram. I have the username gamma_digamma. I basically post math art and math related stuff. I'm gonna build more on that in the future. And that's it for this video. Please stay in, stay safe. Have a great day. Peace out.